Welcome back into my kitchen. Things are moving along pretty quickly, I think. We've got the countertop in as well as the sink. Just got the flooring wrapped up and the new appliances in. Today we're gonna show you everything you need to know about painting, so stay tuned. I was just gonna tell you that the first step of painting is prepping, but actually it's purchasing. You need to know what color you want. And Menards has all the tools you'll need to find the color that's perfect for you. We've got great color centers with samples. You can take as many as you want. I bought a couple of these to just put the color on the wall and see what it looked like in this space, and it really helped us make a decision. We were really gonna go with this color, which I still think is great at the store, but once we saw this on the wall, we really knew that that was the one that we wanted. So we've got all the tools laid out here that you're gonna need. We'll have a link in the description below the video, so you can find all of that on menards.com. So we've got all of our supplies that we need, so the next step is to prep the room. First thing you're gonna wanna do is remove your switch plate covers. A lot of people will try taping them off. You'll end up with a bunch of paint stacked up around those. It's not gonna look as good. You're gonna waste your time. Just take a screwdriver, take the switch plate covers right off, and you'll save yourself a lot of time. The next step is gonna be looking for any imperfections or holes in your walls after you've removed all of your picture frames and switch plate covers. And I'm filling with some spackle. So what we have here is this pink spackle. Goes on pink and it dries white. I'm just gonna use my 5-in-1 tool. You can use a putty knife or something, but just fill those and clean them off, and I'll work my way all the way around the room. I'll use the back end of my 5-in-1 tool sometimes if there's like a nail hole with blowout, and I'll just dent it in and then fill it with the spackle just to make sure that blowout isn't sticking on the surface. As I'm allowing that spackle to dry, I'm just gonna quick go around and dust around the perimeter of the room. Just make sure I get all cobwebs off. And once I'm done doing that, then we can sand and wash the walls. So I'm just going to make sure I get all of the cobwebs and dust that I see that you don't really look at too often. Spackle's dried, so I'm just gonna hit this with a 220 grit sanding block. Just clean it up a little bit. And then once I get done with that, I can wash the walls and get all of that sanding residue or any other dirt or grime that might be on the walls off before we start painting. All right, once you're done sanding all of the spackle on your walls, you're gonna wanna go back and wash your walls, get all that dust off of there, any other dirt or grime that might have been there before. This may seem kind of counterintuitive, but you're actually supposed to wash from bottom to top. And that's because if you start at the top, any grime or dirt sometimes will run, it'll create streaks on the wall where the water runs. So we're just gonna work our way in these sections and make sure we do a good job before we apply our paint. So the next step is going to be taping off any sort of moldings or trims that you're gonna be cutting in. Some people just skip this step because they've got a really delicate hand. I'm just going to be taping off just these trim areas around the windows just for good measure. When you do it, make sure that you're getting the edge right up close to the wall, because if you don't, you're just gonna get paint on your trim. And once you get it on, you can go back over it with that 5-in-1 tool or your finger. Just be careful, because sometimes your trims might have some slivers or something. And just make sure that it's really pressed down tightly up against that edge so it doesn't bleed through. The next step is making sure you cover all of your floors and countertops so you don't get paint on those as well. So for the countertops, I found these heavy duty garbage bags work great. Just lay them out like this, and then you just grab some tape. Just make sure that you get them taped down a little bit so that they don't slide on you. I want to give myself a little bit of room on the edge here because I'm going to be painting along that edge, and I'll probably put tape over the top of it, but we'll just get a little bit of tape down on this to make sure it doesn't go moving anywhere. And we'll do this all the way down the length of the countertop and over any appliances as we paint the soffits up above, just to make sure we don't drip down onto anything we don't want paint on. I took this door off of this cabinet just to make it easier for me to get back along this line with a brush. Had to do that on the other side of the room as well. It's just 2 screws, they should go back on really easily. But once I've got all of my countertops and appliances covered up, then what I'm gonna do is make sure I protect my floor with some drop cloths. These are really nice big canvas drop cloths that we sell at Menards, and this will basically cover the entire room. I've taped it off here on the sides of the baseboard just to kind of prevent it from pulling out as I'm painting. because if it gets pulled away from the wall and you drip, well then it didn't do you any good. So I did that just to kind of hold it there, keep it in place. What also is worth mentioning is I'm not painting the ceiling or the baseboard in this room, but if you were to be doing that, you'd want to be doing it in the order that you paint the ceiling first, followed by the walls, and then you finish up with the baseboard. But now that I've kind of laid all of that out, I think we can kind of get started on the actual painting. So first things first, what we're gonna do is we are gonna open up our paint can here. And you can see I've already dipped into this one. I mentioned earlier that I got behind the appliances before I put in my new appliances. So that's why this is kind of messy right now. But we're gonna stir it up, make sure that all of our pigments are mixed up nicely so we get a good uniform color. And what I'm gonna start with is cutting in. So I'm going to cut in around the ceiling and some of the trim, and we'll work in small areas at a time, and then we will roll after that to keep a wet edge. So you don't want to get too far ahead of yourself, because otherwise you can have the paint dry and then you'll have what they call picture framing, where you can see the lines from your cutting in. So I am going to pour a little bit in my small can here, so I just have a little bit to work with while I'm cutting in with my brush. So we're gonna go on over and get started on that. So I'm ready to cut in. I'm just gonna load up my brush and really make sure I get a bunch of paint in there. And I'm gonna drag both sides just to clean it up. There's still gonna be a bunch of paint on the interior of the brush that I'll be able to use, and this way I won't have a bunch of drips or issues when I cut in. So I'm gonna start up high, use the heel of my brush, and I'm gonna look right down my cut line there, and I'm just gonna pull the heel down there, nice and slow and steady, look down my line. And then I'm going to reload and just clean up anything that I think I can get a little bit tighter on, which this, I was being cautious on that first one. Can work those bristles back towards the edge of that trim. You could tape the trim off. You'll just do this all the way around. You'll work small areas at a time. I'm also just gonna quick pick up this outlet here. So it's worth mentioning, when you get done cutting, you just leave your brush in the paint so that it doesn't dry out. So I just left that in there. I'm gonna pour out some paint to roll, because that's what I'm gonna do next. Get some in there. And you're just going to slowly coat your roller. You don't want to dunk it in there. I'm just going to roll this onto the wall, and one of the methods that is commonly referenced is making like ends like I just did there, or backwards ends, or W's depending on how much wall you work with, and then working back over horizontally. I'm also just going to make sure that I get really close on my cut edge here without touching to cover up those brush strokes that you may see from cutting. If you're working in a little bit of a bigger space than I am without as much interruption, it's gonna be worth having an extension pole. They sell great options of those at Menards. Just twist those onto the end of your roller, and it'll reduce a lot of fatigue, especially if you're working larger areas. So I'm just gonna make sure I'm getting even coverage through this space, finish up all of the areas where I cut in around. Keep working that wet edge, and then I will go back to cutting in another small area, and I will just keep repeating that until I'm done with the room. Then I'll let it all dry and I'll put on a second coat. So by the time I finished up my first coat, I was able to get started again on the second coat of this tan. So I got my 2 coats down. Now I'm gonna move on to this accent color on the soffitting. So I'm gonna go start cutting the edges in, and then we will roll these, and it should go pretty quickly, I think. So I got the coats done on the soffit of my nice blue accent color. So what I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna remove the tape from my main walls here. I wanna do it before everything dries super well, because then it can sometimes peel the paint off when you remove the tape. So I'm just gonna peel that off right now. And then after that, I'm going to fold my drop cloths in on themselves inward, so that any wet paint that might have been on there doesn't touch the surface of the floor. So I'll do that, and then finally, I will go downstairs and show you how to clean up your brushes and rollers. So I'm done painting, I'm done cleaning up my drop cloths and my tape, but I'm not done yet because you want to make sure you clean out your brushes and rollers really well, or they'll be as good as garbage once that paint dries. So I've got my 5-in-1 tool, I've got my roller here, and I'm just going to scrape out paint from the interior. And you'd be surprised how much paint is held inside one of these rollers. You're gonna have to go through it a few times here to clean all of this out. And once I get done scraping this out, I can start rinsing it out with lukewarm water. So I'm gonna wash off my 5-in-1 tool first there, leave that at the bottom, and start running water through the roller cover. It's running clear now, so I'm gonna stop. I'm just gonna kind of wring some of that extra moisture out with my hands. And then I've got a nice laundry sink here. Or nice might be a stretch, but so I'm just gonna spin it out right here, but if you need to do this in a nicer sink, I'd recommend going outside and maybe doing this to get this extra moisture out of your roller. But once you get done doing this a few times, getting all that extra moisture out, you can pop off your roller cover and then let it air dry, and you should be able to use it again going forward. And moving on to the brush, just gonna make sure that I get as much of the paint back into the can, which is pretty much good to go already. So I am going to then just start rinsing it out. And I want to rinse downward. I don't want to rinse the paint back into the ferrule of the brush because once it dries, it'll stiffen up. And then it will not function as well. So I'm going to make sure that I'm rinsing downward, coaxing as much of that paint out of there as I can. And you can even push down into the bottom of your sink basin. And we got it running clear here, so to finish out. And to get all that excess water out of there, we're just gonna spin the handle of the brush in our hands like that. Do that very aggressively. And then straighten your bristles back out and allow it to dry. You should be able to use it for a long time coming. Good luck with your painting project, and thanks for shopping at Menards.